Now, our host, Stephen Lee Morris.
Roger Q. Mason's play, The Lavender Men, takes a look at Abraham Lincoln through a queer lens. It's opening August 6th at the Skylight Theater, being produced by Playwrights Arena and the Skylight Theater. Roger is a Los Angeles-based playwright who was educated at both Princeton and Northwestern, and we are very happy to have them here. Roger Q. Mason, welcome to Animal Farm.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen. I'm really, really grateful to be here. You know, you have been and continue to be a staple in thought leadership around theater in LA, and I've read and followed your various journalistic exploits for many years, and it's an honor to be in dialogue with you today.
Well, thank you. The honor is mutual. I'm glad you're with us. You have a play that is opening at the Skylight Theater / Playwrights Arena.
Yeah.
And it's called Lavender Men. And it is a queer perspective view on Abraham Lincoln. And it is also an adaptation of a film that is in post-production at this point, in which you play a pivotal role.
Well, so, you know, it's funny, you and I were sort of asking before we got on this interview, which came first, the chicken or the egg. I will take you on a little bit of a journey to this moment. So the play of mine that's going up at Skylight Theater with Playwrights Arena is called Lavender Men. And the piece imagines a queer relationship between Lincoln and his legal assistant, Elmer Ellsworth, who was with him in the years just before his first election and into the beginnings of the Civil War. And the piece really has been a long, long journey to production. I started working on the play when I was living and studying in Chicago at Northwestern.
Yeah.
In their MFA program. And really, for me, the play partially was inspired by seeing a genderqueer bathroom for the first time in the city of Chicago. I didn't encounter them here in LA before that time, but I saw gender neutral bathrooms in Chicago, and suddenly I had a name for who I was as somebody who is what we now are calling gender expansive. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And so I started thinking about the ways in which folks who are people of color, who are plus size, and who are gender expansive are often left out of the narrative of American romance. And I started thinking about, well, where did these narratives come from? Well, one of the sources of these narratives is the myth of the white male American masculine figure, the great man. And even within queerness, within the LGBT community, there are certain biases and certain exclusions which occur within that community because it's just a microcosmic reflection of the world in which we live. We learn our preferences and our biases in community, you know, and just because we are a group that may be somewhat marginalized from the normative mainstream doesn't mean that we don't take those same tastes and values and hierarchies with us. So I started thinking about, well, what does it mean for me to insert myself or imagine where we've learned to exclude Black and brown bodies, one from the American story, but also from the queer story. And Lincoln has always been a sort of mythological ancestor to the self-made American man. The idea of somebody who can come from nothing, who can pick himself up by his bootstraps and earn his way to a place of distinction. That myth and that story becomes a rationalization in certain communities for, you know, let's say something like the unnecessary nature of affirmative action in this country. We start using that myth as proof that there are no systems that prevent some groups from succeeding and others from excelling. We don't take into account all of the systemic and sociological factors that may make it more possible for some people, even though they may start at the same place, to succeed and others not. So the play became an insertion. What does it mean for my character that I play in this piece, Taffeta, to insert herself into this narrative, somewhat romantic, of Lincoln falling for his legal secretary, and for her to say, well, what's my stake in it? What place can I have in it? And so she comes in as a picaresque narrator, and at times narrates in their favor, and at other times destroys the flow of things, and at other times sabotages herself, because she has developed so many hates and wounds and self-inflicting problems along the way. And what emerges is that the three of these people are all broken-winged birds, and that what they have to do is form a bond and learn how to fly together through respect and through care. And that's something that it's been so interesting in this process of the rehearsal, to sort of mine these things, not from the perspective of the writer, but from the perspective of the actor, because I also am in this production of the play as Taffeta. And it's been a great lesson for me as the writer to lead with the gut and lead with the heart, because sometimes the best dramaturgical answer is just what you feel.
The film
Yes.
is in post-production, so it's done. The play is still being rehearsed and is in process. How are they different and how are they similar?
So actually, the short film Taffeta has screened around the world. The short film that was adapted from the original play has screened at various festivals in the US, also in the UK, including the British Film Institute Flare Festival. We were in Poland, and we just recently did the LGBTQ Festival in Rio, Brazil. So from the proof of concept that that particular entity provided, Lovell and I felt there's something here. And so we started adapting.
Lovell being?
Lovell Holder is the director
of
this production of the play, and he's also my creative partner. We call it Holder and Mason, the house that stands forever. You know, we finish each other's sentences. And so Lovell and I are working on a full-length piece that's inspired by the original full-length play. This is a film adaptation that we're working on, and that is not in post-production. It's still in development, and more news on that soon.
Okay. So this, and then, so when you say the original play,
I mean Lavender Men, the play that I started in Chicago after seeing The Bathroom.
Got it. Got it. This is very interesting. And the final question on the development of the play, and I suppose you could say, and now it's two movies, really, isn't it?
Right, two films. That's been the gift horse that I really can't kick in the mouth. It's been a very good franchise to me.
Yes. Is this concept, to what degree was it based on? To what degree is it complete fantasia? To what degree is it historical narrative? How much artistic license did you grant yourself?
So I'm going to tell you a little story, Stephen, because I don't normally tell all of this, but it's just you and me on this line.
Oh yes, nobody else is paying.
Nobody's here. So I read Desdemona, a play about a handkerchief, Paula Vogel's play, in 2014 again, because I often go back to Paula when I'm lost in the woods. And I read this play, and it was about the story that was happening behind the story, and it was this sort of intimate portrait of these two folks. And I originally set out and wrote Lavender Men just as the two men, which is Abe and Elmer, and it was a
Yes.
sequence of two-person scenes about their intimacy, and it was sort of episodic and cinematic in the way that that era of Paula's work was playing with the same aesthetic. So
And this knowledge of these two men, this is from the history books, or is this is
So-
rumor, or this is what?
at that time, there was a play called Lincoln is a Fag, I think was the name of the play. It was going around in Chicago, and there was also a book that had recently come out called The Intimate Side of Lincoln. Of course, Gore Vidal and Carl Sandburg,
Yeah.
in sort of days of old, had intimated the notion that Lincoln was
Yeah.
queer. But at this time, this was 2014. It was still sort of a debated issue for reasons that we've stated before. The myth has to stay intact. The masculinity has to be
Right.
monolithic and sound so that, the majority culture can maintain its cultural, its social power. And we often look at deviations from heteronormative patriarchal manifestation as weak. I don't believe it to be so, and we've since then learned there's great strength and fluidity. But in order for that monolith to hold, he can't be queer. So all this, dispelling of that mythology and all that stuff is going on. So I looked at it and I said, well, what if he were queer? And what would that mean for our world if he could be a queer person? It would certainly create a more nuanced and expansive and perhaps inclusive vision of American life. The opposite is happening now, of course. Well, if we can take away Roe versus Wade, what else can we repeal?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
So now what is the expansive version of that? Well, if I can infuse into the zeitgeist that Lincoln is queer, then what other possibilities for harmony and empathy and liberation can we as a culture enact? So that was the dramaturgical work of that version. I wrote the piece. It was about 2015, 2016 in that version, just Lincoln and the legal assistant. Then around 2018, I was asked to participate in Skylight's Writers Lab. It was called Play Lab at that time, and then they changed the name to Skylab. So I said, well, what am I going to work on? And I brought in this piece. And I said I wanted some sort of a narrator on it. So I had two scenes, one at the beginning and one at the end. And it was very simple. There was this little belligerent girl named Taffeta who said, you know what, I'm going to tell you a story, and it's about how, you don't see me. And then she sashayed off, and that was the end of that. And then we do the whole play. And then she comes back and she says, honey, you see they didn't see me, fuck them. Boom, gone. And that was it. Performance interrupters, you've got a nice little thing. The middle is, very romantic and lovely. It's two gorgeous white men having a love affair in Springfield, Illinois. It's a bucolic fantasy. Done. So then I put it away for a while, and I was going back and forth at that time between New York and Los Angeles. And working with the Fire This Time Festival, working at with the Araka Project. This is 2018, 2019. And of course, that was the time that a lot of Black playwrights were coming into very highly regarded, coveted production opportunities. This was the time that Slave Play had first come out. This was Alicia Harris's moment with Is God Is. There was a lot of Dominique Morisseau was really being highlighted in specific and targeted ways by production, and so there were eyes on the Black perspective on American life as manifested in the theater, and then of course Michael R. Jackson's first production of Strange Loop was that same time. And one of the things that I sort of noticed was a dialogue was Black dependency on white affirmation.
Yeah.
For value.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about how to activate taffeta a lot more fully in the play. And we did a read of that early draft where Homegirl just belligerently comes out, and Gary Grossman, who gives excellent notes, says, "Why do we need taffeta here?" And I said, of course, flippantly, because she's fabulous. And he says, "No, but why did we need her here?" And so we went back and forth over several, versions to eventually decide that it was her narrative and it was her story. And that at that time, she needed to be there to discover why she is ignored now by the men that she perhaps wrongly looks to feel beautiful. Now, this rehearsal process that I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I'll come back. But this rehearsal process that we're engaging in right now has proven perhaps an even more penetrating reason for why she's there. There's a voyeuristic desire to see these two fall in love in real time before her, because it becomes a possibility model for her own love. And what we're finding in this process is the piece is so much about her saying, well, I'm gonna help you as long as you have my back. And part of this is, if I can see you and help you fall in love, then maybe somebody might see me. And I may never get it, but at least now I can feel it vicariously through you.
That's interesting. So this was really triggered through the dramaturgy at the Skylight in some way.
It was triggered through a couple of things. In the middle of that process, Lovell Holder and I had started working very, very, very rigorously on a couple of different pieces. We had adapted some other work of mine, and I was developing a beautiful partnership creatively with him. And we had a reading coming up of Lavender Men as a culmination of the Skylight work. And I was in New York and I had to come back. So I knew I had that reading. So I was coming back to LA to do that reading, and then I was going to go back to New York. I was on the plane between New York and LA, and I had met a young woman named Rachel Shuey, who was working with Circle in the Square Theater to do readings of emerging plays on Broadway. So here I was in July, coming back to LA. Now we're in 2019. And I said, she called me and she said, well, she said, where are you? I said, I'm on the plane, I'm going to LA. And she told me, well, come back. For what? Well, you're gonna be on Broadway. What? What are you talking about? I'm doing a reading program at Circle in the Square, and I'd like to strike the iron before it freezes and put you in early, so you get your ass back here. And I said, yes, ma'am. She didn't say it that way, but and I said, well, yes, ma'am. And so there we were, scheduled to do a read in LA, and then we had a reading on Broadway. What? Opportunity of a lifetime for a bi-coastal Los Angeles born and bred writer who's, went to the East Coast, Princeton for undergrad, had spent some time in Chicago at Northwestern, and going back and forth trying to find my way, doing this festival and that gig and this, and all of a sudden you have a forum and a platform and an opportunity to be seen.
In a big way.
In a big way by the stakeholders of this business. You don't get that kind of a chance of a lifetime too often. So I said to Lovell, we're going to do a reading in LA, and we're going to pilot some new material. And then we're going to take it to New York. So we did a read with these new ideas about why is taffeta in the piece. And they worked. Los Angeles was, Gary, I'll never forget, I'm here in the theater right now. And this is one of the walls. And Stephen Gifford, got to shout him out. He's a set designer. And
that's a mighty fine looking wall, I have to say.
This is just the backing. There's a whole thing. I can't say anything else about it. But we finished the read, which everyone is very impacted by emotionally. And Gary comes into my ear and says, I'm doing this play. And I said, okay. Got on the plane. We did some more rewrites from what we learned here. We went over there. We're at the theater the night of the reading, and they having to hold the house 5 minutes, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. I said, what's going on? We get out, that room, Circle in the Square, is full. Sold out reading of the play. For me, that little black girl from LA walking out on that stage at Circle in the Square, in my background is Oklahoma, Daniel Fish's production. And here we are building the next play, the next addition to this conversation about the American dream. And to perform that in front of that audience changed my life. So I came back home. I was doing I had a gig doing a drunk tank immersive show downtown, and then we were going to go into rehearsals in January of, maybe it was February, I can't remember, of 2020. So there we were casting in February of 2020. And then March came.
Yep.
And there was a flu. You see, I'm just trying to tell you what that moment was for me. There was some flu on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, and we weren't to worry about it. And then in the middle of the month, everything changed, March 2020. But I'll tell you, Stephen, a lot of things changed for the better in some ways, because our community, the stakeholders of our community, could no longer hide behind inaccessibility. We were all at home on Zoom. And so something happened in the way we listened to each other and cared for each other in the pandemic, especially in our business. You know, We See You Watt, George Floyd, the pandemic itself, the rallies behind AAPI communities around the country, all of the rallies behind the Jewish American community that we're still fighting, the rallies behind Black and brown folks. All of this is happening because we had to sit down and listen and look at ourselves in the face and really talk to each other. The most intimate form of communication I've found was this, sitting on a Zoom, because you can't go anywhere and neither can I. And so a lot of, tremendous loss. And I just took a moment to think about the tremendous loss of life from the various pandemics we are fighting now. Yet some positive or optimistic things emerged, and I stand in gratitude to all of the people who were brave enough to advocate for not only this play, but also other work of mine that was able to see the light of day in the last 2 years, that led to the ability for me to talk finally to find folks like you. This moment is because of that moment, because the gates came down and people learned to listen and value each other. And so somebody like me, who, has fallen through the cracks, various cracks over the years, finally was able to be heard. And what did I do? I said, don't do it for me. This is not about me. And one of the great, I'll say this to you, and I know you've got another question, I'll be quiet, but I'll say this, and I'm speaking abstractly, but perhaps not. I will tell you what one of the great lessons of the pandemic was for me was the joy and power of motherhood. Now let me explain, I'm not crazy. I had the opportunity to work with National Queer Theater on founding and building a fellowship for transgender and gender nonconforming Black playwrights called the New Visions Fellowship. And mentoring those folks in many ways opened my eyes up to the radical care and mentorship that I can provide to other writers. And in that moment, I no longer was so interested in chasing my own things exclusively. I was interested in helping somebody. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do before, but this kind of solidified for me a mission. I see my work now not necessarily as a grasp for visibility of my own, but a possibility for somebody else behind me looking up to see who's gone first and what is a possible way to get there. That's how I look at the work now.
Link in a link in a chain
A link in a chain.
that's
A
moving
link
forward.
in a chain.
Lavender Men opens at the Skylight Theater, and on August the 6th, it is produced jointly by Playwrights Arena and the Skylight Theater. Roger Q. Mason, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you enjoy Animal Farm, please support us on Patreon.